Okay, today we're going to talk about the problem with positivity. I'm Nathan Frazier. I've got Brett Venat. Brett, how you doing today?
Good, Nathan. How are you?
I'm stoked, man. We've been bouncing back and forth this idea of this podcast slash YouTube show for quite a while now, and it's finally freaking happening, and I'm stoked to be here with you.
Yeah, not exactly the first time we've worked together. If people like what they watch and hear today, there's plenty of me and Nathan in the archives of the internet. I will, if I can, real quick, Nathan, point people to our Emotional Manipulators for Hire podcast series that is free. Many episodes of it, anyway, are free to be found on the internet. And we talk a lot about marketing versus manipulation in those shows. And I highly recommend people go and check those out if they like much deeper dives into, I guess, how you can intellectually and emotionally defend yourself from a lot of what's going on in the world right now, even though we're going to be talking about that here in a shorter form.
So you were telling me that recently on an episode of, I believe, School Sucks podcast, coming to an end, but you did recently do an episode and it was titled Optimism is Bullshit. And I wanted to pick your brain about that because it was kind of an inflammatory title for an episode.
Yeah, it was called Optimism is Cowardice. I don't know if which is worse, cowardice or bullshit. I'm not sure. I feel like cowardice is almost more of an indictment when there is so much encouragement to be optimistic in the face of everything. A friend of mine has a quote that I like: optimism is the only option. And I get that. So this was a bonus show for the supporting listeners of School Sucks. And as part of my private community, we have discussion groups a few times a week. And a few of us were talking about the importance of optimism, especially considering, everything that we're looking at in the world right now. And a friend of mine, Scott Hambrick, from Online Great Books podcast, who's known as being a bit of a curmudgeon, just unmutes and drops this bomb: optimism is cowardice. And then he mutes again and silences the group. So I asked for a bit of a further explanation, and he had, a good explanation for what he was talking about, that if you are choosing optimism only, blindly even, in the face of everything that's happening right now, you are making a choice to not face reality, which, as we've seen in the last year and a half plus at this point, is becoming an increasingly dangerous practice. It doesn't mean there isn't a way to push forward with what's important to you, your purpose. We're going to talk about all that today. But we're seeing that there is more and more hazard in ignoring everything that is going on around you. So a lot of our conversation today is going to be about how to actually balance, what you can control and what you can't, with an awareness of both, but where to point your I would say most of your attention and effort.
So I feel that, especially because I think the reason why things have gotten so bad is because people have, for the most part, decided to put their heads in the sand. Also, as somebody who's very into self-development, very much into positive thinking and trying to maintain a positive attitude, I feel conflicted because on one hand, I think it's important to keep a positive attitude. If you go into a battle already feeling defeated, defeat is almost guaranteed. But at the same time, a lot of people walk into a battle in complete denial of the fact that they're in a battle. And right now it feels like that is very much the place that we find ourselves in. A lot of people don't even realize, or are afraid to admit, or are afraid to stand up to a lot of the stuff that's going on. And not to get all libertarian conspiracy theorists, but I mean, we have watched a tremendous amount of human freedom and liberty just be sacrificed at the altar of security in the last year and a half, more so in the last year and a half than I think in our entire lifetimes. And a lot of people still are just not willing to admit it. And even a lot of like the business and self-development people, some of them are starting to stand up. I've seen Grant Cardone is taking a hard stance against things. Tony Robbins taking a hard stance against a lot of the stuff. Russell Brunson taking a hard stance against a lot of the stuff that's been going on. But it's been recent. It's only been within the last couple of months that a lot of these guys are starting to take a stance. And a lot of people are still just trying to pretend everything's just going to get better. We just keep following the experts and everything's going to work itself out. And yeah, for me, being somebody who believes in the power of positive thinking, but also seeing that living with your head in the sand about things it's had its toll over the last 15, 18 months.
Yeah. First of all, we could have used those guys 10 years ago when we were saying a lot of the same things. Russell Brand also is hitting it pretty hard on YouTube, and I like to see that right now. But yeah, I think it even gets a step worse as far as a lot of people are concerned. I obviously try not to spend too much time in places like Facebook, but when I do, I feel worse. And one of the things that has me feeling worse lately is I noticed there were a lot of people that I went to like high school with and college with, or knew from somewhere else, aside from like our world, our media world, our philosophical world. And boy, they were real crusaders against what they called fascism. From 2016 to, I don't know, about January 2021. And now they just post pictures of food and their kids. And the timing strikes me as weird, but transition. That is all outside of my sphere of control. I could comment on their little food posts and say, hey, you forgot about fascism. But I know that's not super productive or a great use of my time. And that takes us back to that conversation that I was having with my group, where my friend dropped the optimism is cowardice bomb. The conversation that took off from there was really about spheres of control. And spheres of control is something that I've been talking about on School Sucks almost entirely since the beginning, where a lot of people get animated or excited about making change in the world. And instead of focusing on building influence, right? Building up themselves so they can be more a person or more a platform of influence. I saw a tendency a decade ago that people would travel as far away from themselves as possible to talk about, these global issues or national issues or political issues, things that they're never really going to be able to exert influence on. And the consequence of that is a sense of powerlessness, not just in like your effectiveness as a person, but I think it also has like a real psychic effect too. And what we were starting to observe with people conditioning themselves to this powerlessness 10 years ago is out of control today with the way platforms like Facebook and Twitter work, because they're giving you a massive horizontal view of everything that's happening in the world without any depth, without any like vertical knowledge or drilling into all these subjects. So if you scroll through Facebook, or I don't even know how to scroll through Twitter. I've never been able to spend more than like 5 or 10 minutes on there at a time. But if you're in that infinite scroll, you're seeing headline, argument, issue, but the average person is not engaging in it in a way that's giving them any depth. So instead, you're getting that feeling of overwhelm and powerlessness without even like maybe trying to operate outside of your sphere of control. You're just trying to kill time while you eat lunch, or, wait for a bus or something like that. And people are getting that same effect. And that's becoming a very, very normal way of life for most people, is a kind of intellectual helplessness, even if they never label it as such. So the thing that I harped on from the beginning with people who wanted to make change in the world was identifying your sphere of control, right? And once you do that, and once you operate in it, you should be able to expand it instead of living outside of it, directing energy and attention there. And unfortunately, for too many people, letting everything beyond your sphere of control crush or suffocate what's actually in it, which is, your will, your optimism, your perseverance, all of those things. So is optimism cowardice? I would say no, if you're directing that optimism inside your sphere of control. You have my permission to be as cynical as you want right now, especially about what is beyond that sphere of control, but there is space for optimism inside your sphere of control. And I think that's a very, very important place to point most of your focus. Of course, another thing we're going to talk about today, without burying your head in the sand. I don't think you have to do that.
Yeah. And the way that I kind of look at it, I'm a motorcycle rider and I love getting out and riding my motorcycle. And one of the things that they teach you when you're first learning how to ride a motorcycle, or one of the things that you quickly learn, is where you put your attention is where the motorcycle goes. So if you're looking off to the left, your shoulders kind of tweak to the left, your weight kind of shifts to the left, and then you start veering off to the left. If you're looking to the right, you veer off to the right. So one of the things when you're learning to ride is they say, hey, be aware of the obstacles, but don't focus on them. Don't be staring at that pothole, because if you stare at the pothole, you're going to ride right into the pothole. Don't be staring at the tree, because if you stare at the tree, you're going to ride right into the tree. And if you're aware of the obstacles, but you're focusing on where you want to go, you're going to get to where you want to go. And I think a lot of times people either go to one of the two extremes. They focus all of their energy on the obstacles and they run into the obstacles, and they live their entire lives that way, always focused on what can go wrong, what is going wrong, and they just keep running into those things. Their life is manifestation of all of these horrible things that can go wrong. I think people go to the other extreme trying to combat that, which is they only pay attention to the path and they only pay attention to where they want to go, and they're completely focused on positive thinking, and they're just ignoring the potholes. They're ignoring the trees that might fall down in their way. And that's a great way to crash as well. I think that maybe leaning more towards the optimism, more towards the positive thinking, but not ignoring the fact that there might be a pothole. Because if the pothole's there, you have to acknowledge it. You have to steer around it. You have to know that it's there. You don't focus on it. You don't give it 100% of your attention, but it feels like it's not really an either or. It feels like it's a both. You need to stay focused on where you want to go in your own life. You need to stay focused on where you want society to go, or what the better things are that could be reached, reaching our potential as individuals or as a society. But you also need to be aware of the potholes, and you need to make sure that you're doing what you can to avoid them and not just pretending that they're not there.
Yeah. And maybe even embrace them as part of the journey, right? Now that sounds maybe a little bit woo, but I'll give an analogy. I live in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and people all over the world might be surprised when I say what it is, but it's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is this wild place of hills and valleys and old roads made out of brick, where in some places there are deep ruts in the road from cars just driving through them for, 100 years at this point. So this city is in many ways, with potholes and all these wild turns and uphills and downhills, a kind of obstacle course. This place is destroying my car, my shocks, my transmission. But there are so many destinations that I'm excited to go to visit my girlfriend who lives on the other side of town, to go downtown to the cultural district and see all the wonderful sights, to walk over the bridges, to go to PNC Park, this beautiful place where the Pittsburgh Pirates play. There are hazards along the way. And I think that trying to avoid hazards in a place like this, trying to get to all the destinations I love, would be a very stressful and frustrating process. So there has to be some acceptance of hazard in our way. And I think like what I'm talking about in this analogy, really, just to take it off the road and into our lives, is purpose, right? Now, purpose doesn't necessarily have to be thought of as a destination, like I'll be happy when I reach this thing. But so many people, so many highly achieving people and super productive people, all the way back to Napoleon Hill, have talked about this idea of having a definite major purpose for life, a why. And that why has to be strong enough to move through obstacles. Actually, forget Napoleon Hill. This goes back to like Nietzsche. So like 19th century, he said something like, he who has a strong enough why can bear any how. And I think that's a useful way of thinking, is to, first of all, identify this thing, know it, plant it in your mind and in your soul, and talk about it with other people. If it is compelling enough, those obstacles, those potholes, will be tolerable and a worthwhile hazard on the path that we are traveling. I think my pursuit of purpose, I will admit, has kind of waxed and waned through the years, which is also like useful information. Like if you're not feeling a high level of passion or commitment about what you're doing anymore, it doesn't mean your purpose is wrong. It might mean your means of pursuing it is wrong. You ever read Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow? We talked about it a whole bunch on my show years ago. In the book, he talked about something called, I think he called it like the law of least effort. And school, the 12 years that we all spend in public school certainly reinforces this idea when we associate learning and hard work with pain and boredom instead of like personal reward, because all of the motivators in school are extrinsic and we're not really doing anything for ourselves while we're there. So we look for paths of least resistance. Where are the potholes not? Well, they're on the highway, and the highway is boring and stupid. I want to get into the ruts. I want to get into the back streets and the cool neighborhoods around here, and that means there's going to be hazards. Just to return to that analogy for a minute. So I think that being able to establish this purpose, that it's something compelling enough. Like if you wanted Brett to just shout out his purpose right now, I aim over the course of my life to liberate as many people as I possibly can from the things that make them unhappy and unfree. And I want to do that for myself by finding a kind of intersection between education, entertainment, and accessibility. So there it is. Now I'm just coming to the end of a 12-year run where I thought I had the road that took me there. And eventually I just decided, okay, this road's taken me as far as it can in that direction. Now I need to get on a new road. Mm-hmm. So I'm in that transition right now, and that's totally fine. There's another great book. The last thing I'll say, there's another great book that I highly recommend for men called The Way of the Superior Man, A Spiritual Guide to Mastering the Challenges of Women, Work, and Sexual Desire. And it's not some red pill thing. It's about a lot more than just that. But one of the things that he talks a lot about in the book is purpose. And, he says that you will break through, these layers, like we talked about the concentric circles of influence or control. That will work that way with purpose as you get closer and closer to your true center. So you'll achieve something, or maybe it's just not exciting anymore, and then it's time to move on to something else. I think people should be willing to see that as a sign of growth, as he says in the book, and not necessarily as a sign of failure or sign of resignation. I took this as far as I can. Is the purpose still compelling? Yes, then let's find new means of achieving it.
Two things there. Number one, sometimes going through those obstacles, you can say, well, I want a smooth journey, or I want a journey that helps me become a better driver. One of the things that was a major mindset shift for me was coming across to saying it was a strong sword is never forged in a bed of feathers. It takes the hot coals to make a strong sword. And that, when I came across that quote, I was just like, holy crap, all of these things I've been crying about and being like, oh, my life, I had to go through this and I had to experience this, and most people never have to worry about this, and I had to worry about it my whole life. And then I was like, oh man, how much stronger am I because of these things that I had to go through? The other thing also is, you were talking about getting there, this journey, and you think that you're getting there, and then when you get there, you're like, oh, this isn't as cool as I thought it was. I think a lot of us go through that. We set these goals, we have these definite purposes that we want to get to, and then once we get there, we're like, oh, this isn't actually as awesome as I thought it was, or it starts to wear off, the novelty of it starts to wear off, and then we need to pick a new there to go to. And understanding that what you think is going to make you happy, once you finally, once my business is doing this, or once I have this type of relationship, or once my crazy uncle who disagrees with me finally sees the light. Then I'll be able to be happy. And then you get there and you're like, okay, this actually isn't as awesome as I thought it was going to be. So being able to be happy now and be like, okay, I'm going to work towards this. But when I get there, stuff might not be as awesome as I think, or might not be as revolutionary as I think. And so I need to appreciate where I'm at right now. I need to appreciate the journey. I need to appreciate swerving past the potholes in search of smoother roads, because when I get there, there's probably still going to be some potholes that I'm not anticipating. And if I'm not able to be happy on this road, I'm not going to be able to be happy on that road. So finding happiness now and working towards a better state, I feel like there's some sort of, not to get too woo, but if you can find happiness with what you've got, you'll get more things that will make you more happy. But if you're just constantly miserable with what you have and you're constantly thinking of all the reasons why it's not good enough, I kind of think of it like in a relationship. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and I keep wanting them to change and I keep thinking to myself, this isn't good enough, this person isn't good enough, this person needs to be better, why would they want to get better? Because in their mind, they're just thinking, well, if I do change the way you want me to change, why would I expect that you're going to like me any better now? You're probably still going to be the same douchebag to me then. And the universe is probably the same way. If you're telling the universe, I want things to be better, I'm not happy the way things are now, the universe is probably going to be thinking to itself, well, if you're not happy now, what makes me think that changing your circumstances for you is going to make you any happier? And I know that's woo, but I feel like the consciousness that we share with all of reality is very similar to the consciousness that we share with somebody when we're in a personal relationship with them. And I just went off the tracks of the woo train right there.
Oh, that's fine. I would just have one caveat to add, because I totally agree with what you're saying about be happy now, right? Because if it's always I'll be happy when, that's a lesson they start teaching us when we're 6 years old, right? You'll thank me later. Do what you'll see eventually. And we have people who are, now in their 50s and their 60s who've deferred that all the way to retirement. Like that's the point where they actually get to be happy. So everybody's recipe for this is going to be different. Well, I do think the be happy now thing is really important. And a lot of that comes from a practice of gratitude. You have to find a balance of not allowing, perseverance and determination, or the willingness to do hard work atrophy in the meantime. So I will reveal here in episode 1 a very large mistake that I made in my life that I'm still paying for. Now, it was a mistake like I had learned or been miseducated into making this mistake, but it was still mine to make. I graduated from high school, then I graduated from college. Like a lot of people like me might graduate from college with a sense of duty to give back to society because of all the unearned privilege that I had. And I spent most of my 20s living a very sacrificial existence, working in education, working in boarding schools, working with a very emotionally distressed population of students, always kind of trading my own satisfaction with work for the badge of being a good employee, a good teacher, by the standard definition, not my definition, not the student's definition of what a good teacher was. By the time I was 31 years old, I was exhausted and I was burnt out. And I said to myself, I'm going to be happy now, right? So I effectively retired from hard work at 31 years old, or what my definition of hard work had been. And I enjoyed telling people things like, as I became a professional podcaster, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, telling people things like, oh, I don't work. I just do what I love. And I was missing a lot of opportunities in the be happy now, which also doesn't always work out perfectly because you're not always happy, right? You can always get up every morning and find 3 things to be grateful for in any situation. But happiness can be elusive at times. I think I maybe deprive myself of certain opportunities to embrace challenges that would have propelled me forward faster. So just to reiterate the takeaways from that whole story, yes, be happy now, but look for those obstacles that, as Ryan Holiday said, right? The obstacle is the way. look for that obstacle that you can push through. Find those challenges, find that hard work, even like break the association that school made with hard work, or your shitty job that you had when you were 23 made with hard work, and recognize the reward of it. Like that balance. And like I said, that's different for everybody, how they find it, but that's a really important kind of intersection to keep in mind, I think.
So as we're kind of closing this up, I don't know if you had anything else. I want to talk about one of my favorite books, As a Man Thinketh. But before I jump into that, did you have anything that you wanted to kind of emphasize as we're out of here?
I had some like little practical tips as far as not burying your head in the sand. Like, how can you still get a sense of what's going on in the world without, stressing yourself out? Because there's lots of ways to stress yourself out, and there are people lining up on YouTube and elsewhere to stress you out about all of the crazy happenings in the world. So I've dealt with that. I felt the impact of that stress through the work that I've done, through my engagement with things like current events or what was going on, all of the insanity that was going on in higher education 5 years ago that is now out in the real world for all of us to enjoy. But I was talking about it when it was confined to college. Just the idea of conscious consumption. That's a term that you've used, right? And how would you actually define conscious consumption for anyone who's never heard that before?
For me, it's conscious content consumption. There's so much content out there, and you can wake up and I'll say it this way. When I am looking to go find a girlfriend, there's certain rap albums that are just like pimp rap albums. It's just like rappers talking about how easily they can attract women. I'll listen to that stuff and women will start becoming more attractive or attracted to me.
You print the lyrics and then read them on the date?
No, but I do make sure that I'm listening to them a lot. When I want to create something, when I'm trying to create a course, or when I'm trying to create email sequences for something, a lot of times I'll spend a lot of my energy and time looking at what other people are creating, consuming content that other leaders in the field are creating. If I'm writing for a customer or a client, I'll look at what their competition is doing. I'll absorb their content, and it has an effect on me. What I consume, garbage in, garbage out, health in, health out. What I'm consuming has an effect on my mindset and where my mind goes. And so if I start feeling like, okay, you're getting too negative, you're getting too crazy, you're getting too, doomer or whatever, I'll check and be like, okay, am I watching too much Tim Pool? Am I watching too much Alex Jones, or whatever the case may be? If I want to feel a certain way, if I want to key my mind or tune my mind to a certain frequency, I make sure that the content that I'm consuming matches that. And it's not specifically saying I'm going to ignore all the stuff that Tim Pool and Alex Jones are talking about, but there's a 1,000 things going on every second, and what I decide to focus on is going to have more importance than it may deserve. And so give it the attention it deserves, be aware of it, but also make sure that I'm not giving it more attention than it deserves, and make sure that the stuff I am giving attention to, the stuff I am consuming, is stuff that serves which direction I want to be going in, serves which mindsets I want to be tuned into.
Yeah, I think it's part of the larger project of like gaining more control of your brain, which is often working against you, just on its own. So much of our cognition happens in the subconscious. And if you think you can, watch like CNN or some other, like something you consider to be cringe media or propaganda for the sake of clowning it, you might find over time that it is imprinting a very negative kind of subconscious effect on you, just like scrolling through Facebook is. So gaining better control of your brain, I think, is really important. And one of the best ways to imprint more positivity, even if you are wanting to at least stay tuned to the horrors of the world, find people who are having fun with the end of the world. If we want to call it that, or the downfall of Western civilization, or the end of the United States, or the whatever you want to call it, find people who are enjoying themselves through it. Right? We know lots of people who produce great media, and what they show is that they're having a really great time while they do it. I think that's really important. I can't stop talking about this No Agenda podcast that I recently started watching, right? Because these guys have fun talking about the grimmest shit out there for 3 hours a couple times a week. And there are lots of people doing that right now. There's lots of examples of that, and everybody's tastes are different, and everybody's desires as far as like where they want what they want their content creators frame to be is different. So, go out and find your person who can engage with the world as it is, but can also have fun while they're doing it. And you can have fun while listening. Don't torture yourself just to be informed. All news is fake news anyway. No one's telling you the whole story. So accept that. And if you want to check in with like the headlines or the cultural or political issues of the day, make sure you find somebody who's not making you feel terrible while you do it.
If you're stuck on the Titanic and it's sinking, go find the band who's still playing, because at least you get to enjoy one last concert.
Go find that Kate Winslet.
Okay, man, I'm going to end it with this. One of my favorite books. I read this book at least twice a year during the whole, we're still going through it, but during this whole insanity of Corona and lockdowns and mandates and all this crazy BS that we're doing right now, I've read this book like 4 times in the last 18 months. It's short. It's real simple. It takes about 40 minutes to get through. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And one of the great analogies in the book is he talks about the garden of the mind. Everybody's mind is a garden. Everybody's reality is a garden. And everybody's garden has weeds in it, and everybody's garden has flowers in it. And your energy, your attention is like water. And if you put all of your attention into the weeds, your garden is going to be overflowing with weeds. It's going to choke out all the flowers, and you're going to find a patch of land that's just nothing but weeds. If you put more of that water on, or all of that water on the flowers, your flowers are going to be strong. They're going to be healthy. They're going to grow up, and you're going to have a garden full of flowers. And I think that, again, the extremes of the two, I think that it's important to make sure that you're pouring all of your water, you're putting all of your energy into the flowers, but don't just ignore the weeds. Don't just pretend that the weeds aren't there. Deal with the weeds, pluck them out, get them out of there, but make sure that you're pouring all of your energy and your attention onto the flowers, because we all have those, and the more we feed them, the more grateful we are for them, the more they'll show up. The more we focus on the path, the clearer the path becomes. Doesn't mean we ignore the obstacles, but it means that we do put our attention and our focus on where we want to go, not where we don't want to go.
Absolutely. I love it. Nothing to add.
All right. I have one thing to add. If you enjoyed this content, make sure that you're subscribed. If you're listening on a podcast app, subscribe on the podcast app. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. And we will do our best to create more content like this every week from here on out. And thank you for your time and giving us your attention.
Thank you.